Five Nights at Freddy's has one of the most complex protagonist lineups in gaming history, so today I'm breaking down every single FNAF protagonist and everything we know about them, starting with a guy who might be the least characterized protagonist in any major franchise. Fritz Smith. Fritz Smith works a single night shift in FNAF 2 and then vanishes from existence. That's it. That's his entire contribution to the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. No voice, no face, no dialogue, no personality. The man is a name on a paycheck and nothing more. He shows up as a replacement after Jeremy Fitzgerald's shift ends, survives one night, and then poof, gone. He exists purely to prove that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza burns through employees like napkins at a birthday party. Here's where it gets funny though. The FNAF community has spent years trying to decode hidden meanings from Fritz's limited presence. Elaborate identity theories, timeline connections, secret lore implications, all constructed from essentially nothing. The man is a redacted document with legs. But that's what makes Fritz interesting in a weird meta sort of way. He reflects Scott Cawthon's early design philosophy perfectly. Fritz Smith wasn't meant to be someone you cared about. He was meant to show you that this restaurant chews people up and spits them out without bothering to remember their names. Which is, you know, not ideal. But if Fritz is the franchise's most anonymous protagonist, the guy who came right before him has a story that's significantly more disturbing. Jeremy Fitzgerald. Fritz Smith got fired and forgotten. Jeremy Fitzgerald got his face rearranged. That's a significant upgrade in narrative importance and a significant downgrade in terms of having a face. Jeremy is the protagonist of FNAF 2, set in 1987 at a newly rebuilt Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He's a night guard, he has a name, he has a paycheck, and he has absolutely zero idea he's about to become the most referenced workplace injury in gaming history. Here's the thing, Jeremy survives 5 full shifts of fending off animatronics that are somehow even more aggressive than the originals because this location introduced a whole new set of robots alongside the old decaying ones. Double the animatronics, double the fun. But then, night 6 happens. The animatronics breach the office and Jeremy suffers what the game heavily implies is a catastrophic bite to the frontal lobe. This is the bite of 87, the single most referenced historical event in the entire FNAF timeline. Every game after FNAF 2 mentions it. Characters whisper about it. It's franchise canon carved in blood. And the wildest part, nobody can fully agree on what happened to Jeremy afterward. Some players believe he died. Others think he survived with severe brain damage, which, honestly, not much better. The debate has been raging for years with zero resolution. Jeremy Fitzgerald walked into a pizza restaurant for a paycheck and walked out as a permanent scar on the franchise's timeline. But at least someone noticed he existed. The next guy on our list didn't even get that luxury because he was already dead before most players ever heard his voice. Phone Guy. Phone Guy is the franchise's first real character, and he doesn't have a face, a body, or even a confirmed name. He's literally just a voice on a phone, and somehow, he's one of the most unsettling presences in the entire series. Here's the thing, Phone Guy exists purely through pre-recorded training messages in FNAF 1, voiced by series creator Scott Cawthon himself. His job is simple: welcome you to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, explain the security protocols, and walk you through your first few nights. Standard corporate onboarding stuff, except the corporation in question is a death trap staffed by possessed robots, so the cheerful tone starts feeling deeply wrong almost immediately. What makes him compelling is the arc hidden inside those recordings. Night 1, he's your standard upbeat company guy. By night 3, the man is barely holding it together. His voice cracks. His explanations get shorter. He starts saying things that sound a lot less like training and a lot more like a goodbye. Then night 4 hits, and you hear what is heavily implied to be his final moments alive. He's narrating his own death in real time while still trying to stay professional about it, which is, you know, not ideal. But Phone Guy isn't just a FNAF 1 fixture. His recordings appear in FNAF 2 as well, revealing the man had a career-spanning relationship with this franchise. And buried in his words is this constant tension between the official explanations he's been trained to give and the creeping realization that something far worse is happening. He knows the company line. He also knows the company line is garbage, and yet he kept kept showing up to work. I don't know what to tell you, but if Phone Guy's defining trait is narrating horror from behind a desk, the next protagonist takes things in a completely different direction, one where the player themselves becomes part of the problem. The player, Vanny. This is where FNAF stops being a game about surviving animatronics and starts being a game about gaming itself. Help Wanted puts you in a VR headset, reconstructing classic FNAF scenarios like their theme park attractions. Sounds fun, sounds safe. Turns out no, because the VR system isn't just a game, it's a delivery mechanism. As you play through these reconstructed scenarios, you gradually discover that the virtual environment contains something it shouldn't. Malicious code, trapped consciousnesses, glitched fragments of something that understands you're there. The animatronics aren't just programmed challenges anymore. They know you're playing. They can communicate across the barrier between their world and yours, which is, you know, not ideal. Here's where it gets genuinely unsettling on a conceptual level. The narrative deliberately blurs the line between gameplay and story until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. You're not playing as a character, you are the character. Your agency, your choices, your willingness to keep clicking through corrupted content is the characterization. There's no pre-written backstory because your participation writes it in real time, and that participation has consequences. The player's experience in Help Wanted connects directly to the emergence of Vanny, a real-world antagonist who essentially crawls out of the game you just played. The thing you interacted with in VR, it got out. Through you, the game you're holding in your hands is, within the fiction, the actual threat. FNAF looked at the fourth wall, decided it was load-bearing, and removed it anyway. But if the player is the concept, Vanessa is the person who got stuck with the fallout. Vanessa is the franchise's first protagonist who might not even be a protagonist. She's a security guard at the Mega Pizzaplex, which sounds straightforward enough. Show up, patrol the halls, make sure nobody steals a Monty Golf prize. But here's the thing, Vanessa can't even secure her own mind, let alone a building full of murderous animatronics. She's introduced as a professional doing her job, but the deeper you dig into her story across Security Breach and Help Wanted 2, the more you realize that her job might not be her choice at all. Vanessa suffers from fragmented memory and compromised autonomy, meaning she does things she can't fully remember or explain. Her actions oppose Gregory's survival at nearly every turn, but the game keeps asking an uncomfortable question. Is she doing this because she wants to, or because something else is pulling the strings? And the franchise deliberately refuses to answer that. She exists in this horrible gray zone between possession, technological manipulation, and independent choice. Maybe it's all three at once. The games give you just enough evidence to build a case in any direction, and not enough to confirm a single one. Her relationship with Gregory is where it really gets painful. She's actively working against a child's survival while simultaneously being a victim of forces she never asked for. That's not a villain. That's not a hero either. That's basically a horror movie about losing yourself to your employer, which, you know, hits a little too close to home. Community debates about Vanessa are genuinely split. Some see her as permanently compromised. Others argue she's the franchise's strongest candidate for redemption. The real answer is probably that FNAF doesn't want you to have a real answer. But if you think Vanessa's situation is complicated, wait until you meet the girl who walks into her mess years later. Cassie, every other FNAF protagonist, walks into a building where something terrible is about to happen. Cassie walks into a building where something terrible already happened, and somehow things get worse. She's the star of FNAF, Ruin, and her entire job is essentially archaeological excavation of a nightmare. The Mega Pizzaplex is years past the catastrophic events of Security Breach at this point. The lights are busted, the infrastructure is crumbling, the animatronics that survived have changed into something new and arguably worse. And Cassie, a young girl with zero business being anywhere near this place, decides to walk right in. Brave? Sure. Smart? Absolutely not. But here's what makes her genuinely interesting. Cassie isn't reacting to a disaster in progress. She's piecing together what already went wrong, which means the horror isn't something is chasing me so much as something chased everyone else, and I'm standing in the aftermath. The Pizzaplex in Ruin is basically a crime scene the size of a shopping mall, and Cassie showed up with a flashlight and good intentions. Her gameplay leans heavily into technical problem solving and environmental navigation, which fits perfectly because the building itself is the antagonist as much as anything living in it. She's rewiring systems, adapting to collapsed infrastructure, and dealing with animatronics that have evolved in directions nobody predicted. The things Gregory ran from, they've had years to get weirder. There are also strong hints connecting Cassie to Gregory and the consequences of his choices, suggesting that Security Breach's endings didn't just resolve things, they created new problems. Cassie is living proof that in this franchise, escaping the building doesn't mean the story is over. Speaking of Gregory, let's actually talk about the kid who started that whole mess in the first place. Gregory is the first FNAF protagonist who actually talks back. That sounds like a small thing, but in a franchise built entirely on silent, faceless night shift workers staring at security cameras, having a kid argue with a giant animatronic bear is basically revolutionary. Gregory is the main character of Security Breach and its ruined DLC storyline, and he fundamentally changes what a FNAF protagonist can be. Here's the setup. Gregory is a young child trapped inside the Mega Pizzaplex during a catastrophic security failure. The animatronics are hostile, the building is massive, and he's got zero backup. Except he does actually, because Freddy Fazbear himself develops a protective instinct toward Gregory. A killer robot decides to be a dad. That's the franchise's first genuinely warm relationship, a child and an animatronic against the world. And it creates this fascinating moral complexity around whether these machines can choose to be something other than murder devices. But here's where it gets complicated. Gregory knows way too much about this facility. He navigates restricted areas like he's got a floor plan memorized. He accesses systems a random lost child shouldn't even know exist. The community has been tearing itself apart debating whether his presence in the Pizzaplex is accidental or completely deliberate. His age, his backstory, his connection to other franchise characters, all of it remains frustratingly unresolved. What makes Gregory work is the contrast. He's a vulnerable kid forced into survival through institutional negligence and animatronics that want him dead. But he's also strategic, resourceful, and suspiciously competent. The surface reads as heartwarming survival story. The subtext reads as something much darker. And speaking of dark, Gregory's story exists in the shadow of the one person responsible for nearly everything terrible in this franchise. Let's talk about him, William Afton. Here's the thing about William Afton. He's the villain. Everybody knows he's the villain. He murdered children, stuffed them into animatronic suits, and built a secret underground laboratory beneath a children's entertainment venue. The man is, by every reasonable metric, a monster. But FNAF 4 does something genuinely disturbing with him. It makes you see the world through his child's eyes. And suddenly, the monsters aren't just animatronics anymore. They're a terrified kid's interpretation of their own father. That recontextualization is what elevates Afton from generic horror villain to something that actually gets under your skin. 5 children murdered and trapped inside animatronics at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a full underground facility constructed beneath Circus Baby's entertainment and rental for conducting experiments on Remnant, the substance that binds human consciousness to mechanical frames. Co-ownership of the very restaurants he used as hunting grounds. The man built his kill rooms and then put his name on the lease. Which is, you know, not ideal. What makes him genuinely chilling rather than just cartoonishly evil is the motivation. Afton wasn't killing for the thrill of it. He was convinced he'd cracked the code on immortality, that human consciousness could be captured, preserved, and transferred into animatronic shells through remnant exposure. In his mind, he wasn't committing murder. He was conducting research. The children were test subjects. Every death was a data point. And the worst part? He was partially right. The consciousness transfer worked. The children did persist inside those machines. His science was real. His ethics just happened to be non-existent. He started as nothing more than a purple sprite in FNAF 2's minigames. No name, no voice, just a silhouette committing atrocities. Every subsequent game gave him more depth, more infrastructure, and more refusals to stay dead. The man treats death like a suggestion. But if Afton is the architect of every nightmare in this franchise, there's one victim whose story might matter more than all the others. His first, Charlotte Emily. Charlotte Emily might be the single most tragic character in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, and in a series built entirely on dead children and haunted robots. That's saying something. Here's the thing about Charlotte. In the Silver Eyes novel trilogy, she's the protagonist. She's the one investigating Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, digging into the disappearances, trying to understand what happened to the children who went missing, and why the animatronics seem to carry something inside them that shouldn't be there. She's smart, she's driven, and she's deeply connected to the whole nightmare because her father is Henry Emily, co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment. The man literally helped build the place that destroyed his family. But here's where it gets dark. Charlotte isn't just studying the possession phenomenon, she is the possession phenomenon. Her consciousness became trapped inside the puppet animatronic after she was killed outside the pizzeria as a child. So every moment she spends investigating what happened to those missing kids, she's investigating a condition she personally suffers from. She's an orphan trying to understand her parents' deaths, and she doesn't fully realize she's already become the very thing she's looking for. That's not a protagonist, that's a ghost who forgot she died. The puppet isn't just some creepy animatronic that hands out gifts at birthday parties. It's a little girl who never got to grow up, trapped inside a machine that her own father's company manufactured. Let that sit for a second. For years, Charlotte existed in the games only through indirect references, minigame appearances, and lore implications. But the Steel Wool era started bridging the gap between the novels and the games, giving her presence more weight in the interactive canon. She went from literary protagonist to recognized lore figure across both mediums, which is a dual existence no other FNAF character really shares. She died trying to understand what happened to her family, and then she became exactly what happened to her family. Cool, that's also a thing that happened. But if Charlotte's story is about becoming the tragedy, the next protagonist is about being born into one and spending his entire existence trying to undo it. Michael Afton. Every protagonist we've covered so far has been defined by one thing: a night shift, a pizzaplex, a security office. Michael Afton is defined by everything. His entire life, from childhood to death and somehow beyond it, is the story of Five Nights at Freddy's. Here's the thing about Michael. The franchise doesn't hand you his identity on a silver platter. You piece him together across years of games like a jigsaw puzzle where half the pieces are covered in blood. He's the child from FNAF 4, experiencing nightmares so vivid they blur the line between dream and memory. He's the unnamed operative in Sister Location, descending into an underground facility because his father told him to. And he's the walking corpse in Pizzeria Simulator who decides, despite literally everything, to finish the job. His father is William Afton, the worst person in this entire universe. The man who murdered children, built torture facilities disguised as pizza restaurants, and treated his own kids like components in an experiment. William sent Michael into Circus Baby's underground facility knowing exactly what would happen. Michael's body was hollowed out, reconstructed, and occupied by a Nard. His physical form was fundamentally compromised. His skin turned purple. He should have been dead, but his consciousness persisted, which is, you know, not ideal when your body looks like that. What makes Michael the protagonist this franchise was building toward is what he does next. He doesn't collapse. He doesn't become another monster in his father's collection. He chooses to fight back. In Pizzeria Simulator, Michael deliberately lures every remaining horror back into one location, including his own father, knowing full well he's not walking out. He builds the trap, he springs it, he burns inside it. A son undoing the sins of his father while barely holding himself together, both literally and figuratively. His arc goes from traumatized child to unwilling test subject to conscious resistor, and it ends with a sacrifice that attempts to answer the franchise's biggest question: can the cycle of horror actually end? Michael Afton bet his existence on yes. Whether he was right is something Five Nights at Freddy's is still figuring out. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.